You done?
I've done on 10.1, yes.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you. Honorable Molefe.
Chair, the issue here is that firstly, I think that we must, so there's no budget 2.0, we're talking about this budget, number one. Number two, that the fuel levy, which was used to replace VAT, is equally regressive. It is inflationary. It dampens consumption expenditure. It is anti-poor. It is anti-growth. And it is very similar to VAT because VAT also ticks those boxes. So we don't really understand what the government was doing here by replacing, or the minister was doing by replacing VAT with a fuel levy, because they are equally dangerous, or they are equally regressive and counterproductive. But the minister shied away from taxing the rich. I know that there is an argument that the rich are already overtaxed, but we are of the view that the minister should not run away from taxing wealth that was accumulated over the years in South Africa at the expense of the labor of others. And so we think that more progressive tax instruments must be found that tax the wealthy more than they tax the poor. At the moment, the fuel levy taxes the poor more than it taxes the rich as a percentage of their income, if you think about it. So if we both have to pay 10 rand on a 1 liter of petrol as a fuel levy, 10 rand for me as a person who earns 100 rand is 10% of my income. But for a person who earns 1 million, it's minuscule. So it's regressive. It taxes the poor more. So I think that point should come out, that what the minister did by jumping to the fuel levy actually was not, it may even have been jumping from the frying pan into the fire. And that is our considered opinion.
Okay. Let me hear from other members, and we'll take the point. We are now discussing exclusively the point about the fuel levy and the amendments to 10.1. Honorable Mkhonto.
When discussing the pensions fund bill, it was explained as to COSATU as a stakeholder, what they presented to the committee. But surprisingly, with this bill, those who participated are mentioned, but it is not explained as to what did they say specifically about the fuel levy, because they did say something about the fuel levy. So I think it will be proper if it can be put in this report what those who participated, what did they say about the fuel levy. Thank you.
So there are 2 points that we are dealing with currently, honorable members. It speaks to the point made at 10.1 about the removal of VAT. What Honorable Molefe's argument is that that has been merely substituted by a more regressive tax in the fuel levy. What Honorable Mkhonto is saying is that actually there was a submission by other entities as it pertains narrowly to the question of the fuel levy, COSATU being one. So those are the 2 points on the table. I just note them, and then we'll work on a way forward in how do we address the two questions on the table. Honorable Wakelin or Bateman, I'm not sure which, and this is not to suggest any. Honorable Wakelin?
Chair, we are brothers in arms.
No, all I wanted to say is that I would never be one to suggest that white people look the same.
Hey, Batu. Anyway,
Point of order.
Chair, the last part of 10.1 refers to two matters which we actually would like to extrapolate on. The first one is a very simple one, where we look at the SARS, we said to this end, the committee supports the additional investment in SARS, and then that's where we stop. But I would like to include, and the commitment by the SARS Commissioner to raise the extra 20 billion in revenue required for the 2026 budget. Because
and that the SARS Commissioner must be held accountable to that.
yes, if we can put it in there. And
So,
then,
Mashile, just wait, hold on. Honorable Wakelin, now,
yeah.
because we are doing three things now,
yeah, that's it. This is an easy one.
I'm starting to worry that it's a bit like the army. You can't ask us to do more than three. So let me hold off on the last point because I don't think there's contention on the issue. Let me move to the first two that were on the floor. Yeah, don't add another one onto the first two. On the first two, Honorable Molefe raises the point about the regressive nature of the fuel levy. This was equally so a submission by the PBO, if I'm not mistaken, in the point. Therefore, I think it would be amiss of us not to note that point. Whilst the removal of VAT as a regressive tax is noted, the fuel levy as a substitute is also burdensome on poor citizens. And it also has an economic multiplier in and of itself. I think the point must be made, and it must be supplemented in 10.1 by saying that obviously the committee notes with concern the introduction of the fuel levy. And of course there are submissions by members of the public who made the same concerns. We are amiss of us not to represent their views. Honorable Bateman, Honorable Wakelin, let's have one meeting. So what were you? Yes, Honorable Bateman.
Thanks, Honourable Chair. I think, I'm just going to give my personal perspective on this one, right? Which is, you sometimes have to make. You sometimes have small losses in the face of big wins, and VAT is a big win. By comparison, to push up to have pushed back on the increase of a VAT rate of 2% is enormous. The fuel levy wouldn't actually be even in the news were it not for the fact that it had been frozen for 3 years, and between budgets 1, 2, and 3, there was an increase that was introduced, which was actually not a very big increase relative to the size of the fuel levy. It's only actually an inflation adjustment. So in real terms, there actually hasn't been an increase in the fuel levy. There's actually just been, it's just held parity with what it was before. But it's a lot of political capital has been made out of it, which is actually not justified. I think that's the big picture context. For 3 years, it was held constant, which was a way to try and undo some of the regressive effects of the tax, which was great. We weren't able to, or the government was not able to, deliver that benefit again this time round, in the context of very tricky circumstances of having to balance a budget without the 2% VAT increase. So I think I'm not trying to take anything away from the sort of underlying point, but I also don't think it must be made into a bigger point than what it is in the context.
Honorable Mwali.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Maybe just to stress the gravity of the regressiveness of this option that was taken by the minister, moving from VAT to fuel levy. The State SA also emphasized the fact that More than 2/3 of the households in the lowest income quintile spend over 20% on their monthly income on public transport. So, Chair, this is hampering hard on the lowest income of this country. So, really, this is very deep. And we will not then count as this committee as a win to say moving from VAT to fuel levy was a win. Because, and also supported by the sentiments shared by most of the public submissions that we got. They specifically mentioned that this is a regressive tax, and it would be bizarre to not see it on our report mentioned that it is regressive, because it is regressive. Thank you.
Honorable Molefe, and then Bateman and Honorable Shat, is your hand up? Or I don't want to. Yes?
Yeah, the other strange thing about this fuel levy issue is that I think it raises about, is it 4.1 billion that it will raise? Huh? 4 billion that it raised from the fuel levy. The budget is 2 trillion. How do you balance, or how do you add, or how do you plug a hole of by 4 billion rand in a 2 trillion budget by taking the 4 billion from the poor? So, I mean, the budget is so big that 4 billion really is minuscule, is nothing compared to the total budget. But then what doesn't make sense to us is, why does the fuel levy become such a big thing that has to be done now? Take that money in a regressive tax from the poor, inflationary, counter, anti-growth, and so on and so forth. Why do you have to resort to such a measure just for 4 billion out of 2 trillion? It really, Chair, I think maybe it is worth mentioning that it doesn't make sense.
Honorable Wakeland and Conto.
Thank you, Chair. I hear the sentiment, but I want to just speak to the facts. I'm just going to go look quickly. The fuel levy will actually just take out 3 billion out of the economy. And the fuel price is still R1.20 cheaper than last year, is what it was. The VAT would have taken out 16 billion out of the economy. And it's within that discussion that we need to try to find each other. These are the actual facts, because I'm concerned when we start because you're not comparing apples with apples, yeah? You're comparing apples with a pear. So let's just be clear on the matter. And I hear it is an emotional issue. But here's the reality. It is cheaper than it was last year. And on the point of Honourable Bateman, there was no adjustment done for the last 3 years on it. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Conto.
Chair, I want to go back to what I presented.
Hey, Honorable Conto, can I ask you to use the microphone?
Okay. Can I go back to what I presented and Honorable Mwale was alluding to it? We can't change because we are seated here, now we understand each other, maybe, then we change what was presented by the public. It can't be. We must put what was presented by the public as is. We can't misrepresent the facts. As Mr. Makakula was saying, Salga said it like this, I can't change it. So even in this case, Chair, the public presented the fuel levy as a regressive tax. Let us put it like that. We can't change what they have said. And to further explain, Chair, there are people, when they want services from the Department of Home Affairs, the Department of Social Development, a clinic, chain stores, whatever, they have to travel. They can't walk. Maybe some of us, we are privileged that we are having these services at our doorstep, and we don't imagine how some people have to travel a few tens of kilometers for them to access basic government services. So it becomes a burden to them. We can't say the fuel tax is something small because we are comparing it to the VAT. No. How does it become a burden to a person who is staying at Mkanduli, to a person who is staying at Bedville, to a person who is staying at Tomo, to a person who is staying at Dludluma? That is what we must talk about, not compare it with VAT. Thank you.
Honorable members, can I make a recommendation here? Firstly, I think it would be amiss of us as a committee to be silent on the fuel levy. Therefore, it must be stated that the committee notes the increase in the fuel levy. And correctly, I think the committee has the right to raise the concern about its impact on households. Because we are having two discussions. At a macroeconomic and fiscal level, others would argue that 4 billion in a 2.1 trillion rands budget is insignificant, and there's a macroeconomic argument that can be made for that. I am not persuaded by the argument that it's been left alone for the last 3 years, therefore it must. Because if you keep the same argument, you could say, well, VAT was left alone for the last 3 years, therefore it should. But what I am also wanting to say is that, of course, as a committee, we have heard submissions from the people of this country as it pertains to this issue of the fuel levy. But I don't think the point, and then what I would do, the other submissions that were made, because this matter has been sufficiently ventilated in court, I do think that it must be noted the fact that a review of the fuel price must not now becomes even more urgent. Because you will recall there was extensive discussion about where it sits in its review. Because whilst Honorable Waitlin says it's been in, the current fuel price is a rand cheaper than what it was, the calculation and the formula thereof still means that government tax of the issue doesn't always sufficiently adjust for whether consumers receive relief when, for example, the fuel price goes down. And I can recall in the first engagements with Treasury, a discussion being raised about how this compares to neighboring countries, Botswana, etc. So I do think as a committee it's important to note the point, to note its impact on the poor, on the economy writ large, given the inflationary. But I do think the recommendation must be the review of the fuel price itself, because that is, as a point of consensus, something that even National Treasury have been calling for, and as something that we can endorse, because that will deal principally with the question that says, how do you ameliorate or deal with the burdensome nature of what this means prospectively? Because the points that have been made by members about its impact on transport costs, input costs, all of that are well made. I think for us, in terms of the division of revenue bill and the increase in the levy, we must note it, and I would urge that the committee take a view that equally so encourages a review on the fuel price. There are preceding points, and the preceding points are other revenue-raising mechanisms must be sought. Because we can't sit here next year and be, if you like, creative people around which tax must be increased next. It's unsustainable. Next year we can't say, okay, this year we debated VAT and fuel. Next year we're going to go fuel and maybe next year we'll try PIT, maybe medical aid tax cuts. Maybe no. Other additional revenue sources must be found. And I think that is we fair on our committee, notwithstanding the need for GDP growth, notwithstanding for all of those which are made in subsequent points. But I think in just dealing, because that's what the point prior is trying to allude to, additional revenue must be found. That's not the debate. Or at least if someone thinks that we shouldn't find any additional revenue, then I'm not sure. But I do think then that point, I think it's 10.1.1 comma, that of course there'll be a negative impact on the fuel levy, and it would be amiss of us as a committee not to note that point. Honourable Mwali, then Honourable Mlefa.
Chairperson, one thing we should pick up from this discussion is that no one is disagreeing with the regressiveness of these two, which is VAT and fuel levy. We are now discussing the extent of the regressiveness when you are comparing these two. But the fact remains, this one that was suggested by the minister is a regressive tax. And it must be reflected on the report, because we are actually discussing and considering a report. It must be reflected there. And also, we cannot remove the fact that from the public, which was invited to comment on the report, they mentioned that it is a regressive tax, and we can't remove it.
No,
it must be reflected on the report that the public is took a position that this introduction of this fuel levy is a regressive tax.
I think the point is being included there. We can add word, but it's included. I don't think necessarily that it's not now not being included. Honourable Molefe.
Chair, to add injury to insult, it has been for a while now that we have observed the deteriorating geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, which indicate, if you are a prudent risk manager, indicate that there will be upward pressures on the fuel price, because the price of oil is likely to go up. And it looks like that risk is slowly materializing, because they say that Iran has closed a strait there, a passage for oil. But even before we knew, even before this happened, and we knew that there is tension there, and that tension is likely to put an upward pressure on the fuel price. So to increase the fuel levy in the face of a potential fuel price increases as a result of exogenous factors is imprudent.
I do think, honourable members, we could go around, because yes, I do take the point, and the matter, as I said to you, has been in multiple fora, notwithstanding our courts. I do think that the point that it is made, that it's a regressive impact, regressive tax, and that, Honourable Molefe, the point that you bolster the point that I'm making, which is to say a review of the fuel pricing. Because here's the thing, it is important, not also in the light of the geopolitical tensions that are going to take place. So even prior to this issue, there was that. What I'm trying to not get us into a space of going is to say, we note the inputs of the public. We noted in the report that the fuel levy is regressive, and that an urgent call be made. What is within the locus control of Treasury? The locus of control of Treasury is to do the review of the fuel price and then make recommendations fitting post that review. Where we cannot be at now is at given the fact that the courts have ruled and this matter is here. So I am suggesting that we take the point that, not keeping in mind the regressive nature of the text, that there must be an urgent review of fuel price and that formula. Honourable Bateman.
Honourable Chair, yes, we would support that recommendation.
So if we can put it on there in that light, Mashile, can you read that sentence so that I know?
Yeah. The committee notes the negative impact of the fuel levy increase on the households that are already burdened by the high cost of living, and therefore calls for the review of the fuel price.